It's August the 13th, 2022. I'm going to continue in this video to address the issues that's been kind of prevalent all week as the, um, the big kerfuffle over the FBI raid on the former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence, and kind of get an update and kind of what we've learned and sort of what the status is since the actual warrant has now been released. We find that basically what the Attorney General said yesterday is in many ways false. I mean, he was trying to suggest that they followed the normal guidelines of staying within the most narrow possible action to achieve their goals. But in fact, the warrant actually practically allowed a search of the everything in the entire premises except for, I guess, guest rooms or something. So that's a pretty, massive thing. And also the materials include every official record that might have existed throughout the entire span of the Trump administration. So that shows that they're certainly misleading everybody and kind of on the defensive, I think, compared to what was actually accomplished. And so that's kind of where we learned. The other issue is the issue of classification. I would want to point out that one thing that occurred to me fairly early on in this is a search warrant actually stated to anything that the search for any document that was marked as a classified document. And this is a specific issue which will become more relevant as we get into this. The issue of marked. Anyway, if you like these videos, please, if you haven't subscribed, please do. We need more subscribers. If you like it, give me a like. It helps out with the algorithm, and any comments would be appreciated. Yes, so apparently there's kind of two issues, I think, that pertain to the documents that were seized. First of all, in the last many weeks of the Trump administration, basically, for some time before that, he'd been trying to get a hold of an investigation of the documents that led to the Mueller investigation and the FBI actions that preceded it, the so-called Crossfire Hurricane project. And also, I think he was also interested in things about the way that the Hillary Clinton server issues were handled, among other things. At any rate, there's a whole set of documents that finally, when he finally got a truly supportive director of national security, he was able to actually get possession of these documents and issued memos formally declassifying these documents. Okay, and I believe it seems like that some of the documents that were seized in the raid on Monday the 8th probably were those documents. Okay, there also, as time goes forward, it's beginning to think that there actually were other documents may well have been present too, although the exact amount of this is a little bit unclear. There are also other documents that weren't classified but were subject to Presidential Records Act and those sort of things. So, and that's a totally different issue and has a totally different legal standing as far as the potential for prosecution and the like. Okay, so first thing is that according to the Executive Order 13526, which was signed into place during the Obama administration, and is still the standing direction for classification within the U.S. government. The president and the vice president are basically exempt from the normal rules that everybody else has to live by. And of course, people that have worked in classified environments, including me, know that there's some very strict rules about how these things are to be handled by just about everybody. But apparently the president and the vice president, under the executive order, have a special standing. Understand that federal law actually grants the president the right to establish the procedures for this sort of thing, and these executive orders, including the one I just cited, are the mechanism of implementation. Okay, so effectively, what that means is if any other government official or contract employee, anybody else, goes off and states something classified to the world, they've just committed a security violation, probably a violation of law, okay, for which they could prosecute. The president's is not in that category. He can read something out of an intelligence document and in an interview simply publicly state it and put it on national TV, and he's totally legally empowered to do that. Something anybody else that did it, a general, a cabinet officer, could be prosecuted if anybody chose to do it. Okay, same thing's true apparently for the vice president, and that is a privilege that that Trump also apparently used. Is now issued a statement, but he had a standing order, which basically said when he walked out of the Oval Office with a classified document, basically, it was considered to be unclassified, and he could, I guess, take it into the residence area, or I guess he could board a helicopter and go to Air Force One and fly to Mar-a-Lago or some other place he's going to stay and take that with him. And I presume that this means that this could be carried in a way that would not, you would normally have to do to transmit a classified document from place to place, for anybody that's familiar with those sort of procedures. Kind of loosey-goosey, but legal, because per the law, per the executive order that's stated in carrying out that law, that goes back to the Obama administration and had not been revised during the whole Trump period, that's completely legitimate. So that means that apparently all these documents apparently left the White House in unclassified status before they ever ended up at Mar-a-Lago. And that means at that point in time, they were deemed by the president at that time as being unclassified. Even though they may have markings on them like top secret, top secret, / something or other, that sort of thing. Weirdly enough, as he operated, that was the case. Now, that puts a whole new light on this situation. The first thing I'd like to point out, but the first set of documents that may have been there and declassified, what may well have happened is that they simply hadn't been updated. Meaning, when you declassify a document, and it's in any case, once that's decisions made by the appropriate authorities, you mark out the classification marks. Sometimes just line through them if the actual classification level isn't classified, or if it is classified, they generally just black the whole thing out. And if you've seen sometimes these redacted documents that are released and look at those carefully, you can see how that's done. Then you usually do something like stamp unclassified on each page, and then on the cover title page you put some kind of a stamp and a declassified by whatever authority, in this case probably by presidential order, and a date on it when it was done. That would be the formal way the document should be prepared to be distributed to the public, okay, or to whoever, okay. So it would be, but the thing is, obviously in this case that wasn't done. So, but the point is, when do they become declassified? At the time the authority, in this case the president, orders it, or at the time that clerical process is completed. And I would say that clearly it was declassified when it was ordered, because otherwise it would be a violation of law rules to actually mark up the document, right? Because that would be an alteration. That's one of the things. So therefore, even if these things are fully marked, they're still declassified unless somebody has reclassified them. So at any rate, I just try to give you a little bit of the thing that therefore he's arguing that these things that are there were all declassified as they were at the time he left, and therefore, now many of these things really aren't presidential records either, because, well, like for instance these documents on the FBI investigation called Crossfire Hurricane, those documents weren't presidential documents. They're FBI documents. They're government documents, but since he declassified them, then they're just unclassified documents, okay? Other documents that really are presidential work product documents would be affected by the Retention Act, but apparently that is not a criminal statute. So, and in fact, he was in negotiation with the National Archives over that. And so that was still ongoing at the time of the raid, or had been ongoing up to the time of the raid, on and off. And so, that kind of blows the lid off this thing. Now, the other issue, I tend to think this nuclear thing is probably a red herring mostly. I mean, nobody is claiming in the inventory that the government released, nobody claimed there was any Q clearance type documents in there. So none of these things pertain to the actual design and construction of nuclear weapons. So in that sense, trying to compare it to Rosenberg's is completely bogus. Okay, it's not that. But it might have some relationship to nuclear weapons. For instance, an intelligence document about the North Korean or the Iranian nuclear programs, and what the status of them is or what our estimate is, would be related to nuclear weapons, but it wouldn't be something that would be undermining our own security as such. There is the issue, though, of intelligence sources and methods, of course. But that's a separate issue. But that's not a nuclear issue. That's an intelligence sources and methods issue. So I think that's something that needs to be kind of understood, too. The idea that he actually had, I don't know, war plan related documents there or something like that, nobody's claimed that yet. So I guess we'll just have to see if there's any truth to it. My opinion is it's probably a red herring. The Democrats were on the defensive for 4 days during the week, and toward the end of yesterday, I think that they needed to push back somehow. And apparently Garland's statement wasn't quite adequate. They said, well, go out and tell your sources, there's something nuclear involved there. That'll scare people. And I think that's what it probably is going to turn out to be. We're not sure. We'll see on that one. At any rate, they were secured in a locked room in a compound guarded by the Secret Service, so there wasn't a whole lot of danger, I think, there. They weren't being put out on the internet or something. So at any rate, I think that's a red herring. The Democrats have gone wild with that, but it's nonsense, I think, ultimately. So that's kind of the state of where I think the situation is. I guess the current administration would, now that they're, of course, declaring in charge for all these months, could declare them reclassified at that point in time and therefore take them. And of course they have taken them, so mission accomplished, I guess. But I don't think that puts him in violation of the law like they're trying to claim, and therefore the search warrant was probably bogus. Another thing, so I addressed that aspect of it. I think that's about as good as you're going to get on it. I stick by my opinion in the previous video that I don't think that Garland and company dreamed this thing up. I think these lower level people, very active people I mentioned, I think they're the ones that put that before him. And yes, he signed off on it, of course, but I don't think this was his. It'd be interesting if he really was the driving force in this whole thing, rather than the person that simply said, okay, I'll let you do it. But I'm not saying this to give him any break. I just think that's kind of my perception. Okay, now the other issue that's kind of also important to understand, that since the FBI, pursuant to a subpoena, had come into the compound and looked at all this material, as far as we know, a couple of months ago, back in June, and went through it all, if they'd have seen anything that was completely dangerous there, why did they wait over 2 months before they acted on it? See, that kind of totally undermines their claim. And even when they got the subpoena, they still took the weekend off before they did the raid. I don't think this is a kind of a hair on fire, save the country type raid. There was no real threat that this stuff was going to get compromised to a foreign adversary in any way. Whereas in the case of the Clinton server, there's evidence, I believe, has been presented that it was probably and sometimes hacked or intercepted by foreign powers, potentially. So where this is paper copy stuff in a storage room, no way in a compound guarded by the Secret Service, I don't think there's any way foreign powers are going to get their hands on it. So I think that the whole basis for what they did is way overstated. That clearly, I think this was a fishing expedition. This was a pretext to go in, and yes, they did accomplish that goal that they stated. But I think beyond that, this was really hoping for getting other things like, I don't know, letters, emails between him and the Proud Boys or something. I don't know what they were hoping to get, but and maybe it was just an intimidation raid, I, flex their muscles. We'll have to see as time goes on, and if they want to litigate these things and try to claim that these were not proper procedures, I guess it's conceivable that it could be a series of court battles over exactly how authority works and can the president do what he claims he can do. But it sounds like under the existing law and established executive order, he could. So at any rate, that's kind of why I know tonight about it. Or today, I guess I should say. I record these. I really am in the wee morning hours here. By the way, I've had some extensive updated things on my social media accounts, particularly on the Twitter, but a few things elsewhere. And the addresses of my social media accounts are listed below. And I also wrap this thing up for now. And until next time, try to keep everybody updated.